Well, the Fed is late to the party again. Jobs report just came out, and there was 108,000 layoffs in January alone, and only 5,000 new job openings. And the reason this is significant is because the numbers in January are actually the lowest on record since 2009, and we all know what happened after 2009. And the reason I say the Fed is late to the party again is because, the Federal Reserve, they don't technically need to exist, but the reason they do, allegedly, is price stability and unemployment. Those are their two goals, is maximizing employment, or another way of saying that is minimizing unemployment and maximizing price stability. And so the reason, they were hesitant to lower rates initially, and I don't know how these people are the smartest in the room, is because they thought, 40% inflation after they printed $10 trillion during the pandemic was transitory and wasn't going to stick around. And then suddenly they started hiking rates at the fastest pace in history. And this is the result. And if you look at where we were at historically, meaning in 2008, when, we were going into recession, if you look at the Fed chair and what his comments were in 2008, because, there's a saying that, history doesn't always repeat, but it rhymes. What happened was, Bernanke was saying that, GDP reports were coming in with a 0.9%, negative growth for third quarter or fourth quarter in 2008. And Bernanke was saying, we might see, a little bit of a softening, but I don't think we're going to see a big recession. And then we all know what happened after 2008. We had the biggest recession in history, and we had some of the highest unemployment in history. But the funny thing about it is, like I said, these guys are allegedly the smartest in the room, and they can't see these things coming from a mile away when they hike interest rates and, fuck up the economy over and over again and print money. And really, we'd just be better off if they stayed out of it. But that's neither here nor there. The fact remains that in 2008, when they first came out with that forecast and said, we don't think there's going to be a big recession, maybe a minor one, and then it became the biggest recession in history, government data is so lagging. What happened was the revisions, because I looked at this because I was curious how long it took, the revisions that came out for the quarterly GDP numbers, because those always get revised every single year and every single quarter after the initial estimates came out, it took 3 years. And in 2011, they revised the quarters in 2008 and 2009, which were showing, our negative GDP growth, which initially came out in 2008 and 2009, showing that we didn't have, any, we had a little bit of a dip, 0.9%. But when they revised them downwards, it was negative 6.2%, 2 quarters in a row, which, to give you, some context, when we had a technical recession, 4 years ago in 2021, it was where we had 2 quarters of negative GDP growth. And then they tried to change the definition of recession. Say, we didn't really have a real recession. We just blah, 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 blah. Charlie Brown's parents, they just made up some fucking bullshit. The truth was that, they revised those numbers downwards again. But in 2008, they revised them down from a 1% drop to 6%, 2 quarters in a row. So cumulatively, that's like a 13, 14% drop, because it's a drop on a drop. So it's, it was a pretty big dip in the economy, and they didn't even see that coming. And so the numbers that they base this data on too is so skewed. What's so bizarre to me is that these people make decisions based on unemployment data, which is a lagging indicator, and CPI numbers, which also, that's a little bit more immediate information, but it's definitely not as lagging. I mean, if you look at the jobs reports, every single year they revise them downwards and they say, for 2024, when we got our revisions for 2024, it was something like, they were like, we were off by 1 million jobs. It was like 900,000. It's like, that's a 50% drop. Like, how are you guys the smartest guys in the room? Again, but anyways, that's, what's happening right now. So I think we're already in recession, and a lot of economists would agree with me. One that I follow very closely, who is very respected, is Danielle DiMartino Booth, and she's been talking about this for a while. And anyways, we'll see what happens with revisions and things like that, but it's not looking good. The employment data right now is preliminarily showing that we lost a lot of jobs. We had 108,000 layoffs. That was up 118% from last January, which is huge. And then we only added 5,000 new job openings, which is not a lot of jobs. And that's part of why the markets, saw a little bit of a slide last week, but not much. I mean, the Dow just hit a new all-time high after, it's not that much blood in the streets. Crypto got hit the hardest, which is the biggest liquidity indicator. But there's a few articles that, I read, and I'll summarize them for you briefly, and I'll link them below so you can check them out. But basically what they were saying is that the biggest layoffs were in the transportation sector. So UPS cut 30,000 jobs, Amazon cut 16,000, and then the rest of the jobs came from, the chemical industries, healthcare, and the finance sectors. And so there's definitely some blood in the streets as it comes with that. And then AI is actually starting to account for some of those layoffs, and they're estimating that something like 7% of those layoffs were due to AI being replaced by robots. And, I'll tell you what my take is on the whole AI revolution, because I do think AI is going to take a lot of jobs. I mean, there's reports out there of it cutting 99% of jobs. When that happens, humans will just have different jobs because AI doesn't have, they're saying eventually it'll become, general intelligence or a super intelligence. And so it'll be like a combination of all the smartest people on the planet. We'll see what happens when we get to that point. We might be fucked, but probably not. If that's the case, then I think AI will just do all the shitty jobs and we can just retire. And it might be a dystopian future where the people in charge of the AI try to make us slaves, but they'll figure something out. And I think all in all, it's a good thing. Imagine if you could buy an AI robot for $4,000 that would build you a house. And it would go log the lumber, dry the lumber, do all the concrete work, everything for you. And then, it might take a year and a half because you've only got one AI doing it, but works 24 hours a day. There's no AI slave labor laws. And so it could be an interesting world, but that's neither here nor there. The bottom line is right now, that's not what's happening. I can barely get AI to make a picture the way I fucking tell it. So I'm not too worried about job security as it comes. It's obviously getting better, but robots are not the sharpest tools in the shed. So regardless of, what the source of the layoffs were, the bottom line is that the economy is definitely softening. And this was some of the softest labor data we've had in years. ADP's report was backing this up as well, and ADP was saying that they had signs of a slowing economy. There's 6.5 million job openings, which is the lowest on record in years, and didn't give a specific date of how far back, but it's pretty soft. It's looking like a very soft labor market. And a lot of people I've talked to, and some of it when I go into the comment section and I look at what people have to say, I see a lot of people saying, hey, I just got out of school. It's been really hard to get a job, or it's been really hard to find a job, and there's not a lot of job openings, not a lot of good job openings or high paying job openings. And so I think there is a lot of pain in the markets, and I think a lot of people are looking for work, but we're getting to this point where the middle class is disappearing. Even a median income job, it's very difficult to buy a house in most metros on that type of wage. And everyone is saying that we have a K-shaped economy, and the top 10% of income earners are the ones doing all the consumption, all the spending right now, which makes sense to me because if you look at everything out there, everything's expensive. And if you're making $100,000 a year, $100,000 a year seems like the starting point to be able to afford life now. And I remember when I was, 20, and I'm 40 now. And when I was 20 and I was entering the workforce, I was looking for jobs and things. And I remember $100,000 was a lot of money. This was back in, 2005, 2004, when you could, rent an apartment, a nice apartment in Orange County for $2,000 a month. And so if I was making $100,000 a year, that was good money. Whereas now if you're making $100,000 a year, a nice apartment in Orange County, which is, where I was from originally, was $4,000 a month or more. And this data is just further evidence of those changes. But let me know what you think in the comments, and let me know what your experience. Are you finding that it's hard to get a job, or what's your unemployment or employment situation? I'm always curious to hear from real world people what they're actually experiencing in the marketplace. Or are they seeing people at work getting laid off? If you're not getting laid off, obviously that means you're not one of the worthless people at your company. And if you did get laid off, it could just be because, their companies like to maintain profits. They'd rather maintain profits than, and sometimes it's just what they have to do to survive. I remember running my company, and there was a couple years we ran at a loss, and it was hard. I would do everything I could to keep people on, but some people, sometimes you just have to let people go. But the truth is, I think this is just the start of a bigger trend. I think we're going to see more pain in the markets going into February and March and April. And it's going to be an interesting time to see how the Fed responds, especially with the new Fed chair, Kevin Warsh, coming in, because he is viewed as very hawkish. He was kind of an interesting pick for Trump to appoint because he's, he likes to let things fail. And he was actually on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors from 2006 to 2011 during the Great Recession. So we'll see how he handles things when he's staring at all this unemployment data and or employment data showing how hard the markets are hit. Anyways, let me know your guys' thoughts, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.